My name is Jennifer Allen, and I am a pediatric nurse. So I work at a hospital,
Mhm.
and I work mostly with children here in Orlando.
Awesome.
And I'm Kierstin Allen, and I work for Meadville Lombard, which is a Unitarian Universalist seminary in Chicago.
Awesome. So my first question, or maybe second one, now that I've asked the first and last name, is on the May 17, Governor DeSantis signed the HB 1069, which silenced educators by prohibiting by any instructive and sexual orientation or gender identity from the pre-K through eighth grade. He also signed the SB 254, an extreme gender affirming care ban, and HB 1521, an anti-trans bathroom bill. How do you think this will affect you and your family?
Well, I Kirsten is a minister and I'm not, and I think that we look at the world in very different ways often. And I think it's related to Uh, I think it's related to that, but I originally was like, oh, we have to leave Florida. This is terrible. They're coming, it starts with trans people and then it starts from there. They're coming for us. We need to be ready. Um, and then just kind of sitting down and having a conversation and maybe calming down a little bit. I do think that it definitely affects us, in that we have our kids are in school, and we have a 5-year-old. And in this moment, she, as far as we know, is not trans. But we do talk to her about um, kind of like there are different kinds of people and how people need our support, even if something is not affecting us directly. But I do think but she does have two moms. And so she's in a classroom. Um, we're on vacation, I guess, right now. But at the time, she was in a classroom with just one other kid who also had has two moms, and then everybody else just had, as far as we know, a mom and a dad, I guess. Um, and just it feels like when we're trying to say, oh, should the teacher teach this way, or should we suggest that um, they include different kinds of handouts that not only include moms and dads, for example. Um, we had to take pause and say, well, is she even allowed to do that? Is a teacher allowed to do that? Or so then, our kid is affected because then here in our house, obviously we do what we can to show her different kinds of families, not just queer families, just in general. But really the outside world has a lot more influence on her. And so if she doesn't see herself or her family represented, then I feel like soon enough she'll start in some ways getting a complex. So
Yeah. So my next question would be like, since the law has been signed and came to an effect, how has it affected the LGBTQ plus communities mentally and other ways, if you know?
Yeah. Well, I feel like these laws are just an escalation of other laws that already existed. So, like the Don't Say Gay legislation was last year, and then this is like an expansion of it this year. Um, but we know people who have left. We know people who are having their medical care cut off. We know people who are pulling their kids out of school. I think that, I went to a webinar that our local queer organization was putting on to help LGBTQ families understand what the legislation means for them. And like you said, it's really confusing for people. And so people have a ton of questions about what they can and can't do and what they'll get in trouble for. And so I think that there are organizations that are trying to provide clarity. And as we've seen, there are people who are starting lawsuits, and so I do feel like people are fighting back or trying to survive, but I also feel like there's a lot of unknowns. Like we here in Orlando, we do Pride in October because ostensibly because it's cooler, although it's not really that much cooler. And a lot of people are like, what's gonna happen? Like,
Right.
are there going to be able to be children at Pride? Are there going to be able to be drag queens at Pride? What is drag? How do you define if someone is in drag or not? Like we know someone who put on an event and there was drag performances there and families were asked to leave that had kids with them. So I just feel like there's a whole lot of like, I don't really know
Right.
what's going to happen. Like, I feel like whenever we get together with other queer people or other LGBT families, this is mostly what we talk about. We have a friend who is a doctor that provides trans affirming care to teenagers, and her work has changed considerably. And she's sort of trying to figure out, like, how can I still honor the oaths that I made as a physician and comply with the law? And is that even possible?
Right.
So I feel like those are some of the impacts we've seen.
Mhm.
Like, we've done fundraising for people who are leaving the state.
That also brings me to my last question. It's like what we talked about for the last few minutes. But do you think that the other states will implement these laws?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
happening already.
Yeah.
Or they're trying.
Mhm.
I feel like Florida's in kind of not a unique position, but like a perfectly horrible position with a governor who's very highly motivated to do this and a legislature that will just roll over and do whatever he says. So in other states, that's not the situation. And so I think it will be a harder fight. But I do think that there is a plan to try this everywhere that they can. And I feel like because transgender people are such a small percentage of the population, a lot of people don't know a trans person or know that they know a trans person, and it doesn't feel personal to them at all, or they just don't care, or they're not paying attention, or they're believing the hype or the propaganda about it. And so I think it's really easy to attack a community like that when there's not a lot of people to defend themselves or to defend those folks. I feel like it's just like an easy win for Republicans to rile their people up and get votes, which is disgusting because it's like people's lives, and so many people are going to be hurt or choose to end their lives, or it's just
yeah, the impact is like this is being done for votes, and the impact is so big on people. And yeah, the level of stress, the level of mental health issues, everything that kind of this exacerbates, or this just kind of it's frustrating and angering to me, because I think that you're just doing this to like get on the news, and other people, like, you don't have an idea, or maybe you do, and you're still doing it anyway. The effect that this has on people, it's serious. It's like real life. It's real life. And I feel like there isn't that's not being talked about. And so
Yeah.
it's,
Well, and I feel like you will see people change their minds or their hearts when it turns out their kid is trans or whatever. Like it's like people have to have it happen to them before they care about it, and I think that that's really sad. And I think that, you know, even though we don't know if our kids are trans, but we try really hard to raise them with an expansive understanding of gender and of who they can be. And I think that those kinds of messages impact them too, even if they're not trans or they're not going to grow up to identify that way. Like we let our kids wear what they want to wear, we let them play with it what they want to play. Like we know kids who have long hair that are male or whatever. Like I just wonder, like, where's the line gonna be drawn, you know? Like kids are not trans but they're gender non-conforming, or they're just free to be who they are, and is that gonna be a problem for them, you know?
or for us as parents who support kids like that.
Right,
You know,
right.
so
Yeah, well, and our kids are biracial, and so I also think that that kind of policing like falls harder on them too, to be like standing out from the crowd or to be doing something that's not quote unquote normative. I think that, you know, I worry about that too. Like we haven't even talked in this conversation about like all the stuff that's happening around critical race theory and AP African American studies and like all that stuff that's happening with people not wanting to face the real history and realities of our country when it comes to race. And so we also talk about that as parents, like how are we going to make sure that us and our wider community are teaching our children reality instead of just like ignoring what makes people uncomfortable. And you know, I think it puts a lot of responsibility on parents to be the educators. I mean, that's okay. We know that that's our role, but like it's hard to be countering what they're hearing at school all the time or whatever, you know. Like we had a situation, our daughter was in kindergarten last year, and it was just a small thing. Like the teacher handed out a form where they were supposed to practice knowing their parents' names and phone numbers as like a safety exercise. But the form said, what's your mom's name and phone number, and what's your dad's name and phone number? And our daughter, like, it just broke my heart a little bit because you could see on the paper that she wrote a name and then she erased it, and then she wrote a name and she erased it, and she could not figure out how to fit her family into that form. And I feel lucky that we have built up her confidence and her sense of our family being normal. So when she came home, she was like, can you believe they asked me who my dad is? Like, I don't even have a dad. How stupid is that? Like that she put the impetus on them of like, why did they ask me this dumb question, instead of like, oh, like, what's wrong with me that I couldn't fill this form out, or that I don't have a dad, or whatever.
What's wrong with my family, or
yeah. But that is gonna shift the more times that something like that happens to her. And we're lucky that some of the staff people at her school were really responsive to our messages about that being a concern. But that's not something people could rely on at every school here.
Absolutely not. And also, can they do something about it? it's also not
That's unclear.
right. Can that form be changed to say parent number one? Or because and really honestly, outside of our queer family, there's kids who have grandparents as their main parent. There's kids who only it's
Just a
not
mom
just
and not a dad.
right. It's not just, not everyone has a mom and a dad, even if they are not a queer family. So there's a little bit of that. Just let's expand our thinking a little bit, because try and be more inclusive. It's the
Yeah,
so.
yeah, definitely, for sure.
Mm.
So thank you so much for your time, and I won't take too much of your morning. So you can just go enjoy your day. And again, I really appreciate it. Thank you.